The grand ballroom glittered under the light of 1,000 chandeliers. Crystal glasses clinked, violins sang a soft tune, and the city's wealthiest elite gathered to celebrate Adrian Cole, the self-made millionaire who loved to show off his power. Standing tall in his tailored tuxedo, Adrian raised a glass with a proud smile. At his side was Vanessa Moore, the elegant woman everyone thought was his perfect match. She shone in a crimson gown, and the cameras adored them. Guests whispered, "What a power couple. He has everything now." But not everyone in that room believed the fairy tale. In the corner of the ballroom, unnoticed at first, a small figure moved. A boy no older than 8 stepped forward, his dark eyes sharp, his hair strikingly similar to Adrian's. He clutched a simple notebook in his hand, the kind filled with numbers and diagrams far too advanced for a child his age. His presence was like a shadow cutting through the glow of chandeliers. The boy, Daniel Torres, wasn't supposed to be there. To Adrian, he didn't even exist. Years ago, Adrian had forced his then-wife, Elena, to choose between him and the child she carried. In a ruthless bid to secure his future with Vanessa, the daughter of a powerful investor, he demanded Elena get rid of the baby. He told her coldly, "This child has no place in my world. If you want to stay with me, you'll do what I say." But Elena had disappeared that night, her heart shattered, her body weak, yet her spirit burning. Everyone thought she obeyed him. Everyone thought the child was gone. Adrian built his empire on that lie. Now, 8 years later, the lie had returned in flesh and blood. As the gala's host announced Adrian's achievements, Daniel's clear, steady voice cut through the music. "You don't deserve applause," the boy said, loud enough for the nearest tables to turn. "You're not the man you pretend to be." The crowd gasped. Cameras swung in his direction. Vanessa's smile froze, her hand tightening on Adrian's arm. Adrian's face drained of color as his eyes locked on the boy's face, his own face staring back at him from 8 years ago. "Who is this child?" a guest whispered. The boy stepped forward again, his small shoes echoing on the marble floor. "My name is Daniel," he said, "and I'm here to tell the truth." The gala erupted in murmurs, confusion, and speculation. Vanessa hissed under her breath, "Adrian, do something." But Adrian stood frozen, trapped between the cameras, the eyes of the wealthy elite, and the undeniable resemblance of the boy standing before him. For the first time in years, Adrian's empire trembled. Not because of his rivals, not because of the market, but because of an 8-year-old child with fire in his eyes. And just as the room held its breath, the grand doors of the ballroom swung open with a dramatic crash. All heads turned. A woman entered, her long black dress flowing like a shadow against the marble floor. Her gaze was steady, her chin lifted with quiet pride. It was Elena, the wife Adrian had discarded, the woman he thought he had broken forever. Adrian's glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the polished floor. The music stopped. What happens when a buried past walks into your golden future? Long before the glittering gala, before her son stood against a millionaire father, Elena Torres had been an ordinary young woman with extraordinary dreams. At 28, she believed love could conquer anything. She believed loyalty meant forever. She believed the man she married would protect her heart. She had no idea those beliefs would nearly destroy her. Elena grew up in Queens, New York, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a school librarian. They didn't have much, but they gave her love and resilience. From a young age, Elena dreamed of working in design, creating warm, beautiful spaces that told stories of the people who lived in them. But dreams often bow to reality. After her parents passed within a year of each other, Elena became the sole guardian of her younger brother, Marco. She put her education aside to work as a receptionist in a corporate office, making just enough to cover rent and groceries. That was when Adrian Cole walked into her life. Tall, magnetic, ambitious. He was a junior financial analyst back then, with a smile that made her believe in second chances. He courted her not with money, but with attention, with promises whispered on long subway rides home. "I'll give you the world, Elena," he said, and for a time she believed him. They married in a small ceremony at City Hall. Elena, wearing a borrowed dress, thought her fairy tale had begun. She cooked, she worked, she supported Adrian's late nights. When she discovered she was pregnant, she felt fear and joy intertwine. "We'll be a family," she whispered to the tiny life inside her. But Adrian's response was not joy, it was calculation. His eyes shifted, his ambition growing larger than his heart. Around the same time, Vanessa Moore entered the picture. Young, glamorous, and, most importantly, the daughter of a powerful investor who could open doors Adrian had only dreamed of. That was when Elena's world cracked. Adrian's love turned into cold commands. His ambition turned into cruelty. He told her flatly, "Get rid of it. Vanessa's father is the key to everything. Don't ruin this for me." Elena's hands shook as she clutched her belly. "Adrian, this is our child." But his glare silenced her. In one night, her fairy tale turned into a nightmare. She left with nothing but a suitcase and the determination to protect her unborn baby. Adrian believed she had obeyed, that the child never drew breath. But Elena, fragile, heartbroken yet fierce, vanished into the shadows of the city. The years that followed were merciless. Elena worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs, waitress by night, cleaner by dawn, assistant by day. She clipped coupons, wore second-hand clothes, and skipped meals so her son could eat. Her brother Marco, away on a scholarship overseas, begged to return, but Elena insisted he stay. "You must finish school," she told him. "You're the only one who can make sure we survive tomorrow." Her sacrifice carved deep lines of exhaustion into her face, but her spirit never broke. For every cruel memory of Adrian, there was the sound of her son's laughter. For every tear shed in loneliness, there was the warmth of little hands hugging her neck. Still, she couldn't escape the weight of fear. What if Adrian discovered the truth? What if he took Daniel away, claiming rights he had once denied? Elena lived quietly, never speaking Adrian's name, teaching her son that his worth was never tied to a father who had abandoned him. And yet, fate had a way of dragging the past into the present. Because 8 years later, that same child Adrian tried to erase was about to stand in front of the world, and Elena would have to walk back into the very fire she had once fled. The city of New York has always been a place of extremes. Glittering penthouses towering above crumbling walk-ups, limousines speeding past buses filled with weary workers. For Adrian Cole, New York was a kingdom. For Elena Torres, it was a battlefield of survival. Their lives moved in the same city, yet in 2 entirely different universes. Adrian's world was defined by marble floors, tailored suits, and boardrooms perched above the skyline. His home, a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Central Park, was a monument to ambition. Art pieces worth millions lined the walls, more for status than for love. Servants hovered silently, ready to pour another glass of aged whiskey or fetch Vanessa's latest designer gown. His days were filled with meetings where billions changed hands, his nights spent at galas where photographers clamored for a shot of the city's golden couple. Adrian lived for applause, for envy, for the illusion that he had won. Elena's world, just a subway ride away, could not have been more different. She and Daniel shared a small 2-room apartment in a modest building in Queens. The wallpaper peeled in the corners, the pipes clanged in the winter, and the stairs creaked with every step. Yet it was a place filled with warmth. On the walls, Daniel's drawings of rockets and numbers covered the cracks. On the worn couch, Elena mended clothes late into the night, her fingers raw but steady. The smell of rice and beans simmering on the stove often mingled with the sound of Daniel reciting math problems far beyond his age. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Elena avoided luxury hotels and glittering events, but she couldn't escape the reminders. On her commute to work, she saw Adrian's face on business magazines displayed in kiosks. Adrian Cole, the visionary investor, the headlines read. She would lower her eyes, holding Daniel's hand tighter, whispering, "He doesn't control us anymore." But deep inside, fear lingered. What if their paths crossed again? That fear became reality the night of the Bright Futures Gala. The gala was the city's crown jewel event, a fundraiser hosted by Adrian's company to support underprivileged children. Irony dripped from every corner of the ballroom. Guests arrived in limousines and glittering gowns, donating millions while sipping champagne that cost more than most families made in a month. The chandeliers sparkled, the orchestra played Mozart, and Adrian basked in the spotlight as if he were a king. At his side, Vanessa glittered like a trophy, her every movement designed to remind the world she had won. It was in this world of diamonds and deception that Daniel stepped forward, notebook in hand, and challenged the empire his father had built on lies. And it was in this same ballroom that Alina, who had sworn she would never set foot in Adrian's shadow again, was about to return. The stage was set. On one side stood a man who believed power could erase the past. On the other, a woman who had lived in silence, raising the very child he had tried to erase. Two worlds, one of ruthless wealth, one of quiet resilience, were about to collide under the blinding light of chandeliers and the unflinching eyes of the city's elite. Because New York never forgets, and neither did Elena. Adrian Cole was the kind of man people admired from a distance but feared up close. His rise to power was not built on kindness or loyalty, but on ambition sharp enough to cut through anyone who stood in his way. To the world, he was a genius investor, a millionaire with a golden touch. To Elena, he was once a husband who promised love, but became a stranger she no longer recognized. In his early years, Adrian had little more than charm and a relentless hunger for success. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood, the son of a factory worker who drank away his paychecks. Adrian swore he would never live like that. Every move he made was calculated to escape poverty, no matter who got hurt along the way. When he met Alina, he saw her as both comfort and convenience, a woman who supported him without question, who worked late hours and stretched their modest income while he built his future. But as his career began to climb, Adrian's mask slipped. The man who once held Elena's hand on the subway began to criticize her clothes, her job, her lack of status. "You're holding me back," he snapped one night after she questioned his late hours. His eyes no longer softened when he looked at her. They hardened, as if she were a weight dragging him down. Vanessa Moore entered his life like gasoline poured on dry wood. She was glamorous, wealthy, and the daughter of a powerful investor. To Adrian, she wasn't just a mistress, she was a shortcut. With her came access to money, contracts, and connections he could never buy on his own. For the first time, Adrian tasted the high life he had always dreamed of, and he wasn't willing to give it up. So when Elena told him she was pregnant, Adrian's ambition twisted into cruelty. Instead of joy, he saw a threat. A baby would slow him down, tie him to a woman he now considered beneath him, and risk his chance to marry into Vanessa's wealthy world. He looked Elena in the eye and delivered words that froze her blood. "Get rid of it. If you keep that baby, you lose me forever." Those words revealed the man he had truly become. Heartless, selfish, and consumed by greed. That night, Elena packed her bags and left, but Adrian never searched for her. He assumed she had obeyed him, that she had erased the child and faded quietly from his story. In his mind, she was nothing but a stepping stone. 8 years later, Adrian's empire gleamed on the surface but rotted underneath. He surrounded himself with luxury and praise, yet paranoia whispered in his ear. He controlled everything. His company, his public image, even Vanessa's every move. Yet deep inside, he feared one thing. Exposure. Exposure of his lies, his past, and the sacrifices he demanded for success. That fear materialized the moment he saw Daniel in the ballroom. For the first time in years, Adrian's carefully constructed mask cracked. His eyes widened, his grip on Vanessa faltered. He recognized the boy instantly, though his mind screamed denial. The boy's face was his own, his son's face, and then the doors opened, revealing Elena. The woman he had discarded, the wife he had erased, was standing in the same room he thought he owned. She wasn't broken, she wasn't invisible. She was alive, stronger than ever, and she was about to remind Adrian that the past never stays buried. The ballroom froze as Elena stepped through the doors, her black dress trailing behind her like a shadow that had come to claim the light. For 8 years she had lived quietly, unseen, forgotten by the man who once promised her forever. But tonight, in front of the city's most powerful, she returned. Not to beg, not to plead, but to reveal the truth Adrian had buried. All eyes turned toward her. Whispers rippled across the room. Who is she? Why does she look so familiar? Is that Adrian's ex-wife? The crowd, intoxicated moments earlier by champagne and flattery, now buzzed with scandal. Adrian's throat tightened. He tried to smile, to wave it off as coincidence, but his hand shook as the broken glass crunched under his shoes. Vanessa's nails dug into his arm. "What is this, Adrian?" she hissed, her perfect facade cracking. Elena's gaze swept the room before locking on Adrian. For a moment, memories flashed. The night he had told her to get rid of it, the way his voice had been colder than winter steel, the way her body trembled as she clutched her belly. That pain had never left her, but tonight she refused to let it silence her. "I didn't come here to ruin your party," Elena said, her voice calm but steady enough to cut through the music. "I came here because the truth can't be hidden forever." Gasps echoed. Cameras tilted. Reporters pushed closer, sensing blood in the water. Adrian forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous. Security, remove her." But before anyone could move, Daniel stepped forward, his small hand gripping Elena's. His voice rang out clear and strong. "You told my mom to get rid of me, but I'm still here." The crowd erupted. Guests covered their mouths, eyes wide with shock. Did he just say? Impossible. Look at him. He's Adrian's mirror. Adrian's mask shattered. Rage and fear clashed in his eyes. "Enough," he barked. "This child is lying. She's lying." But the resemblance was undeniable. The boy's sharp jawline, the same dark eyes, the stubborn set of his mouth. It was Adrian reborn, standing in front of hundreds of witnesses. No denial could erase what the world now saw. Vanessa's face blanched. She had known Adrian's ambition was ruthless, but the idea that he had discarded a wife and child to climb into her father's favor shook her. Whispers turned into accusations. Phones lit up as guests texted, recorded, posted. The scandal was already spilling beyond the ballroom walls. Elena held her son close, but her voice didn't waver. "You wanted power so badly, you tried to erase us. But some things can't be erased, Adrian. Some truths survive." Adrian lunged forward, desperate to control the narrative, but his polished words fell flat. For once, his charm couldn't save him. The empire he had spent years crafting was cracking, not in boardrooms, but in the eyes of people who now saw him for what he truly was. "Get out," Adrian roared, pointing toward the door. "Both of you." His voice, once commanding, now sounded desperate, trembling. But Elena didn't move. She stood taller, Daniel at her side, the weight of 8 years of silence breaking with every word she spoke. "We're not leaving, Adrian, not until everyone knows what you did." The ballroom, once filled with music and laughter, now pulsed with scandal and suspense. The cameras zoomed closer. The whispers grew louder. And Adrian Cole, New York's golden millionaire, was cornered by the family he had tried to erase. And this was only the beginning. The doors of the ballroom slammed behind Elena and Daniel, shutting out the gasps, the whispers, the flashing cameras. Outside, the cold night air hit her like a slap, cutting through the adrenaline that had carried her into that gilded room. Her body trembled, her breath uneven. She had been strong in front of them, strong for her son, but now, away from the lights, the weight of what she'd just done crashed down on her. Her knees buckled. She sank onto the steps of the Grand Hotel, clutching Daniel to her chest. "Mom," he whispered, his small hands patting her arm. "You did good. You told the truth." His eyes, wide and innocent, carried more courage than most adults. But Elena could barely hear him. Shame, fear, and doubt roared in her mind. Had she ruined everything? Would Adrian retaliate? What if he used his wealth and power to rip Daniel away from her? For 8 years she had hidden in the shadows, terrified of this exact moment. And now it had happened. Not in private, not quietly, but in front of the city's elite. Tears blurred her vision. She remembered the hospital room where she had held her newborn alone, whispering promises into his tiny ear. She remembered the long nights, working double shifts, the hunger she swallowed so Daniel wouldn't go without. Every sacrifice had been to keep him safe. But tonight, she had thrown them both into the lion's den. A black car pulled up to the curb. The tinted window lowered just enough to reveal a pair of cold eyes. Adrian's driver. "Mr. Cole requests your presence," the man said, his tone flat, more command than invitation. Elena's stomach twisted. She shook her head, clutching Daniel tighter. "No, tell him I'm done with his games." The driver didn't argue. The window slid back up, the car pulling away into the night. But Elena knew it wasn't over. Adrian wouldn't simply let this go. He had too much to lose, and she had just shattered the illusion he'd built. He would come after her, if not for her, then for the boy at her side. She stood, forcing her legs to steady, and led Daniel down the street. The city lights blurred around her as questions tore at her heart. Could she really protect him? Was she strong enough to fight Adrian, to fight the empire he controlled? Or had she just doomed them both? Back in their small apartment, Elena tried to compose herself. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, scribbling equations in his notebook as if the world hadn't just tilted. She watched him, her chest aching. "Do you understand what happened tonight?" she asked softly. Daniel looked up, his dark eyes calm. "He's afraid of us, Mom. That's why he yelled. That's why he lied." His words, so simple yet so wise, cut through her despair. For the first time that night, Elena realized Daniel wasn't just a child. He was stronger, sharper, and braver than she had ever dared to hope. Maybe he wasn't the one who needed protection. Maybe he was the reason she had the strength to keep going. Still, fear gnawed at her. Adrian had power, influence, and money. She had only her truth, her son, and the fragile hope that justice might still exist in a world ruled by men like him. As Elena tucked Daniel into bed, her phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. "You can't hide anymore. He's coming for you both." Her blood ran cold. She sat frozen in the dim light, the screen glowing in her hand. The nightmare wasn't over. It was only deepening. The message on Elena's phone glowed like a threat carved into glass. "You can't hide anymore. He's coming for you both." Her hands shook as she locked the screen, her mind spiraling. Who had sent it? Adrian's lawyer? One of his hired men? Or Adrian himself, hiding behind another mask? For a moment, panic threatened to drown her. She wanted to grab Daniel and run, pack their lives into a single suitcase like she had 8 years ago. But where could they go this time? Adrian's reach stretched across the city, across countries. No matter how far she ran, he would find them. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, but this one was different. "You're not alone. Meet me tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pier 17. M." Her breath caught. The initial M. Could it be? Elena barely slept that night. Memories of her younger brother Marco flooded back. He had been barely 20 when she disappeared, leaving him behind with nothing but a note. She had begged him to finish school, to take the scholarship overseas, to build a life untouched by Adrian's poison. For years, she had feared he resented her for abandoning him. But what if the mysterious M was him? At dawn, she dressed quietly, kissed Daniel's forehead, and whispered, "Stay close to Mrs. Z. Ramirez downstairs. I'll be back." Her son stirred, but didn't open his eyes. The morning air was sharp as Elena made her way to the pier. Fishing boats bobbed against the current, gulls cried overhead, and the smell of salt clung to the breeze. Her heart pounded as she spotted a tall figure leaning against a post, hands in his pockets. When he turned, her breath caught. Marco. He was older now, broader, his boyish face carved into sharper lines. But his eyes, those same brown eyes, were filled with relief. "Elena," he said, his voice breaking as he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I've been looking for you for years." Tears spilled before she could stop them. "I thought you hated me." "Hate you?" He pulled back, gripping her shoulders. "You saved me. You gave me the chance to finish school, to make something of myself. And now it's my turn to save you." He explained everything. After earning degrees in business and finance abroad, Marco had returned to New York quietly. He'd built his career in private equity, far from Adrian's influence. What Elena didn't know was that Marco had been following Adrian's empire from the shadows, watching the cracks form. Adrian's company wasn't as untouchable as it looked. Debt, risky deals, questionable partnerships. Marco had been gathering evidence. "You're not powerless anymore," Marco said firmly. "We can fight him. I have the documents. If the public knew what I know, Adrian's empire would collapse overnight." Elena's chest tightened. For the first time in years, she felt the faint spark of hope, but doubt still gnawed at her. "He has money, lawyers, power. What do we have?" Marco leaned closer, his voice steady. "We have the truth, and we have Daniel. That boy isn't just smart, he's a prodigy. Do you know what it means for the world to see Adrian deny his own son, while that same sun shines brighter than anyone?" Elena's mind reeled. She had spent 8 years protecting Daniel from Adrian, never considering that her son could become the very key to bringing Adrian down. As she stood on the pier, the morning sun rising over the city, she realized the battle was no longer just about survival. It was about justice. But even as hope flickered, fear returned, because if Adrian sensed they had allies, his cruelty would only grow sharper. And Adrian Cole had never lost without a fight. For years, Elena Torres had lived in the shadows. Her days were filled with survival, working late shifts, cooking simple meals, patching clothes and keeping her son safe from a world she feared would rip him away. But after that night at the gala and the reunion with Marco, something shifted. The fear that had once chained her now began to burn into something new: resolve. "You can't fight him hiding in the dark," Marco told her as they sat in his sleek apartment overlooking the East River. The place was modern, minimalist, nothing like Adrian's ostentatious penthouse. It was a space earned by discipline, not deceit. If you want to beat Adrian, you have to stand in the light. You have to become someone he can't ignore. Elena stared at her reflection in the glass window. She barely recognized the tired woman with hollow cheeks and weary eyes. For years she had believed invisibility was her shield, but now she understood it had also been her cage. The next morning, Marco took her shopping. Not for luxury, not for labels, but for armor. A tailored black blazer, sharp enough to cut through condescension. Simple yet elegant dresses that spoke of quiet power. Shoes that clicked against marble floors with authority. "Clothes don't make you stronger," Marco said as she hesitated, "but they remind the world you're not to be dismissed." Elena's transformation wasn't just on the outside. With Marco's guidance, she began to learn the language of power, the numbers, the deals, the strategies Adrian had once used to climb. Nights that used to be spent mending clothes were now spent poring over financial documents, Marco explaining every loophole, every weakness in Adrian's empire. She wasn't just listening, she was absorbing, her sharp mind awakening like embers fanned into flame. At the same time, Daniel became her greatest source of strength. His brilliance in mathematics and technology stunned even Marco, who admitted, "This boy is beyond gifted. He's a miracle." Elena watched her son, pride swelling with every problem he solved, every invention he sketched. She realized Adrian had underestimated not just her, but the child he had tried to erase. Weeks passed, and the timid, exhausted mother began to fade. In her place rose a woman who carried herself differently, who looked people in the eye without shrinking. The first time she walked into Marco's office building, heads turned. No one saw a forgotten ex-wife. They saw a woman with fire in her step, purpose in her gaze. Still, late at night, doubt whispered. Adrian was ruthless, and she knew the cost of crossing him. Some nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking herself if she was ready to risk everything again. But then she would hear Daniel's steady breathing, see his small hand curled against his pillow, and the answer always came, yes. One evening, Marco handed her a folder thick with documents. "These are the keys," he said. "Proof of his fraud, his debts, the deals he's buried. With this, we can take him down." Elena's hands trembled as she held the folder. For the first time in 8 years, she felt not like prey, but like a hunter. She stood taller, squared her shoulders, and whispered, more to herself than to Marco, "He thought he erased me, but I'm still here." Her transformation was complete, and soon Adrian Cole would see just how dangerous the woman he discarded had become. The Bright Futures Gala had been a battlefield, but Elena's first true strike came weeks later, at an event Adrian believed he controlled completely. It was the annual Investors Forum, a gathering of the city's most powerful financiers, CEOs, and politicians. For Adrian Cole, it was more than a business event. It was his stage. Every year he stood before the crowd, delivering forecasts, flaunting numbers, reminding them all why he was the man to follow. Tonight, he expected nothing different. He wore confidence like a second skin, Vanessa dazzling at his side. Cameras flashed as they entered, and Adrian smirked as if the scandal weeks earlier had already been buried. But this year, someone else was on the guest list. When Elena stepped into the glittering hall, silence rippled behind her like a wave. Heads turned. Whispers began. She was no longer the tired, invisible woman they had once dismissed. In her tailored black suit and steady gaze, she carried an aura of quiet authority. At her side walked Marco, impeccably dressed, his presence signaling legitimacy. Together, they looked unstoppable. Adrian's jaw clenched when he saw her. "What the hell is she doing here?" he muttered to Vanessa. Vanessa, uneasy, whispered back, "Ignore her. Don't give her the power." But ignoring Elena was impossible. When the keynote address began, Adrian took the stage, launching into his usual speech about growth and opportunity. The audience clapped politely, nodding along, but a different energy stirred in the room. When he spoke of innovation, eyes darted toward Daniel's name in the program. For the first time, Elena's son had been invited to showcase his award-winning project, a project Marco had quietly made sure was submitted. Halfway through Adrian's speech, a hand rose from the audience. It was Elena's. The moderator, sensing the tension, hesitated before handing her a microphone. "Mr. Cole," Elena said, her voice steady, "you speak of growth and opportunity. Tell us, how much of that growth came from the debts you buried, the partners you betrayed, the lies you told?" The room went silent. Adrian's smile faltered. "This is not the time or place." But Elena pressed on. She opened the folder Marco had given her, revealing documents, contracts, evidence. "Here's the time. Here's the place. For too long you've hidden behind wealth and charm. But these papers tell a different story. Fraud, exploitation, deals signed in shadows." Gasps filled the hall. Photographers snapped wildly. Board members whispered in panic. Adrian tried to laugh it off, but the sound was brittle. "This woman is bitter, vengeful. She's nothing." Then Daniel's voice rang out. He had been waiting in the wings, notebook in hand. "If she's nothing, then why am I here? Why do I carry your face, your blood?" He held up his award-winning project, the audience buzzing as his brilliance shone. "You wanted me erased, but I'm standing in front of you, smarter, stronger, alive." The blow landed harder than any scandal. Adrian's empire wasn't just threatened by numbers, it was threatened by truth, embodied in the very sun he denied. The investors shifted, unease spreading. Adrian's carefully polished mask began to crack. He slammed the microphone down and stormed off the stage, Vanessa trailing behind, her composure shattered. Elena stood tall, Daniel by her side, Marco behind her. For the first time in 8 years she didn't feel powerless. She felt unstoppable. And the war for Adrian's empire had officially begun. Adrian Cole had always believed his empire was unshakable. For years his charm and power silenced rumors, bought loyalty, and erased mistakes. But after the investors' forum, the cracks in his foundation could no longer be ignored. The morning after Elena's confrontation, newspapers across the city blared headlines. "Millionaire Adrian Cole exposed." "Former wife unveils hidden scandal." And perhaps the most damning, "Genius child stuns forum, claims to be Cole's son." Images of Daniel holding his award-winning project, his resemblance to Adrian undeniable, were plastered on every screen. The world wasn't just fascinated, it was outraged. Social media exploded with anger. How could a man abandon his own child? He preaches opportunity while betraying his family. Adrian Cole's empire is built on lies. Within days, investors began pulling out. Stocks of Cole Enterprises plummeted, dropping millions in value overnight. Adrian stormed into his office, slamming the latest reports on the table. "Find out who leaked those documents," he barked at his executives. But the truth was, no leak had been needed. Elena and Marco had struck with precision. The documents they revealed were authentic, irrefutable. Adrian's allies, once eager to bask in his glow, now scrambled to distance themselves. Board members avoided his calls. Clients canceled meetings. Vanessa watched it all with growing unease. She had married ambition, not disaster. For years she had tolerated Adrian's arrogance because it came with power. But now, power was slipping through his fingers. "You need to fix this," she snapped one night, her voice sharp as crystal. Adrian glared at her. "Do you think I don't know that? This is a smear campaign. She's trying to destroy me." "She?" Vanessa shot back. "You mean the woman you left for me? The one raising your son? Maybe she's not trying. Maybe she already has." Her words cut deep, but Adrian refused to admit defeat. He threw himself into damage control, press releases, staged interviews, hollow denials. But the harder he fought, the worse it got. Every denial was met with another piece of evidence from Marco's folder. Every smile on camera was undercut by Daniel's innocent, undeniable face on the front page. Meanwhile, Elena kept quiet. She didn't need to fight in public anymore. The truth was fighting for her. She focused on Daniel, keeping his life as normal as possible, while Marco strategized behind the scenes. "He's unraveling," Marco told her one evening. "It's only a matter of time before he loses everything." But Adrian wasn't ready to surrender. If his empire was burning, he would drag Elena and Daniel into the flames with him. He hired investigators, dug into Elena's past, and whispered threats through anonymous messages. He wanted her afraid again, like she had been years ago. Yet something had changed. Elena no longer trembled. She no longer hid. Every threat Adrian sent only fueled her determination. One evening, as Adrian sat alone in his penthouse, staring at empty whiskey glasses, Vanessa packed her bags. "I didn't sign up for this," she said coldly. "My father won't back you anymore. You're finished, Adrian." He lunged toward her, desperate, but she pulled away. "You destroyed yourself," she said, walking out the door. For the first time in his life, Adrian Cole stood truly alone. The man who once commanded boardrooms and ballrooms now sat in silence, his empire crumbling, his allies gone. But deep inside, a storm brewed. Adrian wasn't just angry, he was vengeful. And if Alina thought his fall was over, she was about to learn he still had one card left to play. Adrian Cole had lost the one thing he valued above all else: control. His company's stocks were crashing, investors had fled, and Vanessa had walked out, her father pulling millions in backing with her. For a man who built his life on appearances, the humiliation cut deeper than any wound. In the silence of his penthouse, Adrian paced like a caged animal. The city lights sparkled beneath him, mocking his downfall. Every headline screamed betrayal. Every article painted him as a fraud, and every photo of Daniel was another knife twisting in his gut. He had always feared weakness, and now the world saw him as nothing but weak. But Adrian was not ready to disappear. He had clawed his way out of nothing before, and he would do it again, even if it meant crushing Elena and the son he once denied. His first move was intimidation. He sent private investigators to trail Elena, snapping photos of her leaving work, of Daniel walking to school. One evening, she found an envelope slid under her door. Inside were pictures. Daniel at the playground, Daniel holding his mother's hand, Daniel asleep by a classroom window. A single note read, "He should be with his father." Elena's blood turned to ice. She clutched the photos, her body trembling. For a moment, fear threatened to undo the strength she had built. But then Daniel, curious, asked, "Mom, what's wrong?" She forced a smile, tucking the photos away. "Nothing, sweetheart. Nothing at all." She couldn't let him see her fear. Meanwhile, Adrian launched a legal assault. His lawyers filed petitions claiming paternal rights, demanding custody of Daniel. In interviews, he suddenly played the victim, painting Elena as a manipulative ex-wife using a child for revenge. "I only want to be part of my son's life," he told reporters, his voice dripping with false sincerity. But Elena wasn't alone anymore. Marco fought back with documents proving Adrian's neglect, his fraud, his history of cruelty. In court filings, they painted the true picture: a man who had once demanded his wife erase the very child he now claimed to love. Judges and lawyers whispered, and Adrian's case weakened before it began. Still, he refused to back down. "If I can't win in court, I'll win another way," he snarled to his assistant, slamming a fist onto his desk. That other way was darker. Adrian reached into old contacts, men who thrived in shadows, who owed him favors. If he couldn't take Daniel legally, he would take him by force. A plan began to form, one that would blur the line between desperation and madness. At the same time, Adrian's health began to crack under the pressure. Nights of whiskey and rage left him hollow-eyed. His reflection showed a man he no longer recognized, a desperate, broken figure clinging to the shards of his empire. Yet his obsession with regaining control over Elena and Daniel only grew sharper. One night, as Elena tucked Daniel into bed, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a threat, but a warning. The message came from an unknown number. "He's planning something bigger. Protect Daniel." Her heart pounded. She showed the message to Marco, who frowned. "He's cornered. That makes him dangerous, more dangerous than ever." Elena looked at her son, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm gathering outside. Fear twisted in her stomach, but beneath it burned something stronger: defiance. Adrian Cole wanted to play his last card. But Elena was no longer the woman he had crushed years ago. And when his plan unfolded, she would be ready. The city moved like any other day, taxis honking, subways rumbling, children laughing on playgrounds. But for Elena Torres, every sound carried an edge of fear. The warning text still echoed in her mind: "He's planning something bigger. Protect Daniel." She kept her son close, walking him to school every morning, watching the shadows of every stranger who passed. But no amount of vigilance could prepare her for what Adrian Cole was about to do. It began on a crisp autumn afternoon. Daniel had stayed late at school for a science workshop, his notebook filled with diagrams of circuits and rockets. Elena arrived at the gates, scanning the crowd of children spilling out. At first, she smiled. There he was, running toward her, his dark hair bouncing in the sunlight. But then, from the corner of her eye, she saw it. A black van, idling at the curb, too close, too still. Before she could react, two men stepped out, dressed in plain clothes but moving with the precision of predators. One grabbed Daniel's arm. The boy screamed, his notebook scattering onto the pavement. "Daniel!" Elena's voice tore through the air as she sprinted forward. Parents gasped, children froze, teachers shouted. The man tried to drag Daniel toward the van, but the boy kicked and thrashed, his voice hoarse with terror. "Let me go, Mom!" Elena lunged, clawing at the man's sleeve, her nails raking his skin. "Get your hands off my son!" she screamed. The second man shoved her back, but she refused to fall. Adrenaline fueled her strength. She threw herself against the van's door just as Daniel's small hand slipped from the man's grip. The chaos drew attention. Teachers blew whistles, parents pulled out phones, recording every second. Sirens wailed in the distance, someone had called 911. The men panicked, realizing the scene was unraveling. One cursed under his breath, shoving Daniel to the ground before scrambling back into the van. Tires screeched, the vehicle speeding away into traffic. Elena collapsed beside her son, pulling him into her arms, her heart pounding against his ear. "I've got you, baby. I've got you," she whispered, her tears wetting his hair. Daniel clung to her, trembling, but alive. The police arrived minutes later, questions flying. Witnesses described the men, the van, the license plate partially caught on a parent's camera. Elena's mind raced. She knew exactly who was behind it. Adrian had gone from threats and lawsuits to something darker. He hadn't just wanted control, he had tried to steal her son. That night in Marco's apartment, Elena replayed the events, her hands still shaking. Marco paced the room, fury radiating from him. "This isn't business anymore. This is war." He crossed a line. Daniel, curled on the couch, looked up with wide, frightened eyes. "Why does he want me, Mom? Why doesn't he just leave us alone?" Elena knelt beside him, brushing his hair back gently. "Because people like him think they can take whatever they want. But he's wrong, Daniel. You're not his prize. You're my son. And no one will take you from me." Marco placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we fight smarter. He wants to play dirty, we'll expose every skeleton in his closet. We'll make sure the world sees him for what he really is." Elena nodded, her fear hardening into fire. Adrian Cole had nearly succeeded once when he tried to erase her son before he was even born. He had failed then, and tonight he had failed again. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The next time Adrian came for them, she would be ready to end it. The attempted kidnapping had changed everything. What was once a private war between Adrian and Elena now demanded the eyes of the law. The police investigation revealed connections too neat to ignore. The van had been rented under a shell company linked to Adrian's associates. The evidence was enough to bring both custody and criminal hearings into court. For Elena, stepping into the courthouse felt like stepping back into a nightmare. 8 years ago, she had walked away with nothing but her son in her belly. Now she walked in with Daniel at her side, Marco behind her, and the weight of justice on her shoulders. Cameras swarmed the steps, reporters shouting questions. "Elena, do you fear for your son's safety?" "Adrian, are you guilty of orchestrating the kidnapping?" Adrian, dressed in his finest navy suit, strode past them with forced confidence. His lawyer carried stacks of documents, his expression cool, but Adrian's eyes betrayed the storm inside. Every glance at Daniel cut him, because the boy's face was his own reflection. Inside the courtroom, silence carried a heavy weight. The judge entered, gavel striking wood, and the case began. Adrian's lawyers moved first, spinning tales of a father desperate to be part of his son's life. "Mr. Cole has always wanted to be a father," one attorney claimed. "He has the resources, the home, the stability that Miss Torres cannot provide. This is not about money, it is about giving Daniel the life he deserves." Elena's fists clenched under the table. Stability? A man who once ordered her to destroy her child now dared to call himself a father? When it was her turn, Elena rose slowly. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with every word. "This man is not here because he loves my son. He is here because his empire is crumbling and he needs control. 8 years ago, when I told him I was pregnant, he didn't celebrate. He didn't hold me. He told me to get rid of it. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Daniel's small hand gripped hers tightly. She lifted her chin. I left with nothing because I chose my child over his ambition. I raised Daniel alone. Every meal, every sleepless night, every scraped knee, I was there. Not him. He doesn't know my son. He doesn't know what Daniel loves, what he dreams of, what he fears. A real father doesn't deny his child. A real father doesn't try to erase him. The judge's gaze sharpened, weighing her words. Adrian's face reddened, his mask of calm splintering. He slammed his fist against the table. She's lying, he shouted. She's bitter because I moved on. The outburst only strengthened Elena's case. Marco rose, presenting documents to the court, proof of Adrian's fraudulent business practices, the shell company tied to the kidnapping attempt, financial records showing his recklessness. Piece by piece, the image of a caring father collapsed into that of a dangerous, desperate man. But the most powerful blow didn't come from Elena or Marco. It came from Daniel. When the judge asked if the child wished to speak, Daniel stood. His small frame looked fragile behind the wooden stand, but his voice carried with clarity. He's not my dad, Daniel said, his eyes locked on Adrian. A dad doesn't try to make you disappear. A dad doesn't scare your mom. My mom is both my mom and my dad. She's enough for me. The room fell silent. Even the judge paused, her expression softening at the boy's courage. Adrian sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound. For the first time he had no words. No lies strong enough to fight the truth spoken by his own son. And in that silence, the empire of Adrian Cole began to collapse inside the very walls of justice. Vanessa Moore had always loved the spotlight. The red carpets, the cameras, the whispers of admiration when she entered a room draped in silk and diamonds, it was the currency she craved. And for years, Adrian Cole had been her ticket to it all. Together, they had played the perfect couple. Their smiles choreographed, their wealth flaunted. But beneath the glitter, Vanessa was pragmatic. She loved power more than she loved Adrian. When the courtroom battle exploded across headlines, Vanessa watched in silence. At first, she dismissed it as a temporary scandal. "You'll fix it," she told Adrian one night, swirling champagne in her glass. "You always do." But Adrian couldn't fix it. His empire was hemorrhaging money, his investors were gone, and his public image had been shattered by Elena's testimony and Daniel's brave words. Every article painted him as ruthless, heartless, desperate. And Vanessa knew what that meant. Her father's support was next to vanish. The cracks in their relationship widened quickly. One evening, Adrian came home, his tie loosened, his face red with fury. "They froze my accounts," he muttered, slamming documents onto the counter. "I can't access half my assets until the court hearings are done." Vanessa arched a brow. "So what are you going to do about it?" "What am I?" Adrian turned on her, his voice sharp. "I've been fighting every damn day while you sit here buying dresses and acting like nothing's happening." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't you dare blame me. You built your empire on lies. You chose to betray your wife, abandon your child, and gamble everything on greed. Don't look at me now like I ruined you." The words stung more than Adrian expected. For years, Vanessa had been his shield, his partner in deception. To hear her say out loud what he had tried to bury ignited a rage he couldn't contain. "Without me, you're nothing," he spat. Vanessa laughed, cold and sharp. "Without me, you would have never touched this world. Who do you think opened the doors for you? Who gave you access to my father's money, my family's name? You think you climbed alone, Adrian? No, you climbed on my back, and now you're falling." That night, Vanessa packed her bags. She didn't sneak away, she wanted him to see. As she zipped her final suitcase, Adrian blocked the door. "You'll regret this," he growled. She tilted her head, her voice steady. "No, Adrian, you will, because I'm going to testify." His face drained of color. "What?" "You heard me." She shouldered her bag, her gaze unwavering. "The court wants witnesses. They want the truth about what you did to Elena, about how you manipulated everyone, about how you begged me to help you destroy your own family. I'll give it to them." He reached for her arm, but she yanked it free. "Don't touch me. You've already destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure the world sees it." And with that, Vanessa Moore, the woman he sacrificed everything to have, walked out of his penthouse and out of his life. Adrian stood in the doorway, chest heaving, his world collapsing piece by piece. For years he had believed Vanessa was his greatest prize. Now she was his greatest enemy. And when she took the stand, Adrian Cole's final mask would shatter. For 8 long years, Elena Torres had lived in survival mode. Her life had been measured in rent payments, grocery lists, and sleepless nights spent worrying about the future. But after the courtroom battle, something shifted inside her. For the first time since Adrian cast her aside, she wasn't just surviving. She was standing tall, and the world was finally seeing her for who she really was. The headlines began to change. No longer was she just the ex-wife. Reporters called her the mother who defied Adrian Cole and the woman who chose her child over power. Interviews requested her story, but Elena refused most of them. She wasn't interested in fame. She wanted something greater: stability, dignity, and a future for Daniel. That future began to take shape when Marco approached her with a proposal. "Elena," he said one evening, spreading papers across the table in his office, "you have a gift. The way you see design, the way you make any space feel like home, that's not something you should keep hidden anymore. Let's start your business." Elena blinked in surprise. "My business? Marco, I can't." "You can," he interrupted firmly. "I'll handle the capital. You'll handle the vision. People already see you as strong, resilient. They'll trust you. They'll want to work with you." For years, Elena had pushed her dreams aside, but with Marco's support, she dared to try. Together, they launched Torres Interiors, a design firm specializing in creating warm, livable spaces for families. Unlike Adrian's cold empire, her business was built on authenticity. Clients came not just for her talent, but for her story, the story of a woman who rebuilt her life from ashes. Within months, projects poured in. Small apartments, cozy cafes, nonprofit offices. Elena poured her heart into every design, making each space a reflection of comfort and resilience. Photos of her work spread online, accompanied by her story of survival. People admired not just her designs, but the woman behind them. Daniel beamed with pride. "Mom, you're famous now," he teased one afternoon, scrolling through an article praising her work. Elena laughed, ruffling his hair. "Not famous, sweetheart, just finally being seen." But her triumph wasn't only professional. Personally, she blossomed. The woman who once hid in second-hand clothes now carried herself with quiet confidence. She wasn't chasing wealth or status. She was proving, to herself, to Daniel, to the world, that she was more than the scars Adrian left behind. The most powerful moment came during a charity event for single mothers. Elena was invited as a keynote speaker. Standing on stage, she looked out at the crowd of women who, like her, had once felt invisible. "I lost everything once," she said softly, her voice steady. "But in losing it, I found what truly mattered: my son, my strength, and the truth that no one can erase you unless you let them. To every woman here who feels small, let me tell you, you are not. You are powerful. You are enough." The room erupted in applause, many wiping away tears. Daniel sat in the front row, clapping harder than anyone, his eyes shining with pride. Elena stepped down from the stage, her heart swelling. She had been humiliated, abandoned, and nearly broken. But tonight, she wasn't the victim. She was the victor. And somewhere in the shadows, Adrian Cole watched, seething. Because the woman he once tried to erase had become unstoppable. The courtroom battle had shaken the city, but what truly captured people's hearts was not the lawyers or the evidence. It was Daniel. The boy who should never have existed, the child Adrian once demanded erased, had become a symbol of resilience. And soon he would prove just how strong he truly was. It happened at the National Science and Innovation Fair, an event broadcast nationwide. Daniel had been invited to showcase his award-winning project, a sustainable energy prototype he had designed almost entirely on his own. At only 8 years old, he stood among teenagers and university students, his mind years ahead of his age. Elena sat in the front row, her heart pounding with pride and nerves. Marco leaned beside her, whispering, "He's about to change everything." The stage lights beamed down as Daniel walked up with his small frame, his voice steady as he explained his project. The audience listened, captivated. When he finished, the applause shook the hall. Reporters scribbled notes, cameras flashed, and for a moment, Daniel was just a boy celebrated for his brilliance. But then, a voice rang out from the back of the hall. Deep, commanding, unmistakable. "Daniel." Elena's blood froze. She turned and saw him, Adrian Cole, flanked by 2 lawyers, striding down the aisle as if he still owned the room. Whispers erupted. Cameras swung toward him, eager for drama. Daniel stiffened on stage, his small hands gripping the podium. Adrian's voice echoed. "You're my son, and no matter what anyone says, nothing changes that. I want the world to know you belong to me." Gasps filled the hall. The reporters leaned forward, hungry. Elena rose from her seat, fury blazing in her eyes. "You don't get to claim him now," she shouted. But Adrian ignored her, his gaze fixed on Daniel. The boy stood frozen, his young face pale but his eyes burning. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his answer. And then, with a clarity that silenced even the cameras, Daniel spoke. "You're not my dad." The words were small, but they hit like thunder. The audience gasped, murmurs rippling across the room. Adrian blinked, as if struck. Daniel's voice grew stronger. "A dad doesn't try to erase you before you're born. A dad doesn't scare your mom. A dad doesn't send men to take you away." He turned, his eyes finding Elena in the crowd. "She's my mom. She's my dad. She's everything. You're nothing to me." The hall exploded in applause, cheers, even tears. Parents in the audience clutched their children tighter. Reporters scrambled to capture every word. Adrian stood frozen, his face white with rage, unable to respond. Elena's tears streamed freely as she rushed to the stage, pulling Daniel into her arms. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. In that moment, the world saw not just a boy but a truth too powerful to deny. Adrian had lost the war, not in court, not in business, but in the heart of the very child he once cast aside. And as Adrian stormed out of the hall, cameras flashing around him, one truth became undeniable. Daniel Torres had become the voice Adrian Cole could never silence. Adrian Cole had built his life like a fortress, walls of wealth, towers of influence, and gates guarded by fear. But when Daniel's words echoed across the nation, "You're not my dad," that fortress cracked beyond repair. The fallout was immediate. Television networks replayed the clip of Daniel's defiance on a loop. Social media crowned him a hero, a child brave enough to speak truth to power. Hashtags trended worldwide. Daniel the Brave, Truth Over Greed, Adrian Cole Exposed. Meanwhile, Adrian's empire unraveled. Investors who had once clung to him as a visionary now fled like rats from a sinking ship. His stock plummeted further, wiping out millions in days. His board of directors, desperate to salvage what remained, called an emergency meeting. Adrian arrived at headquarters in a tailored suit, trying to project confidence. But as he stepped into the boardroom, the faces around the table told him everything. No admiration, no loyalty, only calculation and cold disdain. "Adrian," the chairman said, clearing his throat, "effective immediately. The board has voted to remove you as CEO." Adrian laughed bitterly. "You think you can run this company without me? You all owe me." One board member slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of Marco's evidence, fraudulent contracts, hidden debts, offshore accounts. "We don't owe you anything," the man said quietly. "We owe our shareholders, and you've destroyed their trust." For the first time, Adrian realized he had no power left in the one place he thought he was untouchable. The boardroom that once crowned him king now exiled him as a traitor. The humiliation didn't stop there. Days later, federal investigators announced a probe into his financial dealings. News anchors spoke his name not with respect but with scorn. Protesters gathered outside his penthouse with signs reading, "Justice for Elena and Daniel," and "Greed has consequences." Adrian tried to reach Vanessa, but her number had been blocked. He called old allies, but none answered. Even his lawyers, once eager to serve him, now demanded payment up front, a payment he could no longer guarantee. Alone in his penthouse, he poured glass after glass of whiskey, staring at the skyline that once symbolized his triumph. Now, every light in those skyscrapers seemed to mock him, reflecting the empire that had slipped through his fingers. But Adrian's greatest pain wasn't the money. It wasn't the company. It wasn't even the prison of public opinion. It was the boy. The boy who looked exactly like him, who carried his blood, who had stood before the world and declared him nothing. In his darkest hours, Adrian replayed Daniel's words over and over. "She's my mom, she's my dad, she's everything. You're nothing to me." Those words echoed louder than any headline, sharper than any legal document. They stripped him of the one thing he could never buy back: legacy. The final blow came when federal agents arrived at his penthouse with warrants in hand. Cameras swarmed outside as Adrian was led away in handcuffs, his once flawless suit wrinkled, his face pale. The man who had once commanded rooms with a smirk now shuffled past flashing bulbs, reduced to a cautionary tale. The crowd outside jeered. Among the chants, one voice rose above the rest. "You can't erase the truth, Adrian." And deep in the city, Elena and Daniel watched the broadcast together. Elena's hand rested on her son's shoulder as Daniel whispered, almost to himself, "He finally can't hurt us anymore." Adrian Cole's downfall was complete, and the empire built on lies had crumbled into dust. The city had been buzzing for weeks with the news of Adrian Cole's downfall. His arrest dominated every headline, his trial set to be one of the biggest corporate scandals in years. For the world, it was a spectacle. But for Elena and Daniel, it was the first breath of peace they had taken in nearly a decade. For the first time in years, Elena slept through the night without jolting awake in fear. The photos of strangers lurking outside her apartment, the threatening texts, the endless dread, all of it had vanished the moment Adrian was taken away in handcuffs. Justice hadn't been fully delivered yet, but the weight pressing on her chest had finally begun to lift. Daniel felt it too. He no longer looked over his shoulder walking to school. He laughed louder, played freely, and spoke of dreams without hesitation. "Mom," he said one evening, his notebook spread across the table, "when I grow up, I don't just want to invent things. I want to help kids like me, kids who didn't have dads. I want them to know they're not alone." Elena's throat tightened, tears brimming in her eyes. She pulled him close. "You're already doing that, Daniel. You're stronger than most adults, and now the whole world knows it." Marco, ever the steady protector, handled the legal aftermath. He worked with prosecutors, supplying the evidence that ensured Adrian's empire couldn't be rebuilt. Fraud charges stacked against him, and whispers of a possible prison sentence filled the air. Marco often reminded Elena, "We didn't just survive him, we beat him." But healing wasn't just about Adrian's destruction. It was about reclaiming life. Elena poured herself into her growing design business, Taurus Interiors. Every project she completed wasn't just work. It was a piece of her rebuilding herself. Clients sought her out not only for her talent but for her story of resilience. She had become a symbol, proof that betrayal could be survived, that scars could turn into strength. One afternoon, she was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference. Standing before hundreds, she shared her journey, not as gossip, not as scandal, but as testimony. "I once thought my life was over when he walked away," she said, her voice firm yet tender. "But the truth is, it had just begun. My son gave me courage. My brother gave me strength. And I discovered that no man, no matter how powerful, can define who I am." The applause roared, many women standing with tears in their eyes. Daniel's healing was visible in his brightness. At school, he thrived, winning competitions and making friends who admired his brilliance. Teachers whispered about his future, college scholarships, international opportunities. Yet despite his talent, Daniel remained humble, always looking for ways to lift others. "Mom," he said once, "you taught me something important. Being strong doesn't mean being alone. It means knowing who stands with you." Justice came full circle when Adrian's trial began. Though Elena didn't need to testify further, Vanessa's betrayal had already cemented the truth. She attended one session with Daniel. They sat quietly in the gallery as Adrian, once a titan, now sat in a gray suit, shoulders slumped, his lawyers fighting a losing battle. Daniel looked at him only once before whispering, "He's not scary anymore." Elena squeezed his hand. "That's because the truth is stronger than his lies." Walking out of the courthouse that day, sunlight warm on their faces, Elena felt a chapter closing. They had been through fire, but they weren't burned. They were forged stronger. Adrian Cole had lost everything, but Elena and Daniel had gained what mattered most: freedom, dignity, and the power of healing. And their future, once shadowed by fear, now glowed with hope. The shadows that had once haunted Elena Torres's life were gone. Adrian Cole was no longer a looming threat, but a broken man facing justice. For the first time in 8 years, she felt the freedom to breathe without fear, to dream without limits. And with that freedom came a new beginning. Her design business, Taurus Interiors, grew faster than she had ever imagined. What started as small projects for local families blossomed into contracts with respected firms and community organizations. Her designs weren't just stylish, they carried her story. Clients loved how her spaces felt alive, filled with warmth and resilience. "You don't just decorate rooms," one client told her. "You heal them." Elena smiled at that. Perhaps in designing new homes, she was also rebuilding her own. Marco remained her steadfast partner, managing finances and ensuring the business thrived. At meetings, people often whispered in admiration of their bond. Few knew the full story, that the brother she had once sacrificed everything to protect had now become her shield. Together, they were unstoppable. Proof that family loyalty could outlast betrayal. And Daniel, he was the brightest light of all. His name had spread far beyond New York. Articles called him a young prodigy, schools sent invitations, and technology firms reached out with offers. But Daniel stayed grounded, his heart tied to his mother's sacrifices. "We don't need to rush, Mom," he said one evening, sprawled across the couch with his notebook. "I just want to keep learning, keep building. I want to make you proud." Elena kissed his forehead, tears in her eyes. "You already have, 1,000 times over." The city that once felt like a cage now felt like a stage. Elena no longer avoided the neighborhoods where Adrian's face once towered on billboards. Those ads had been taken down, replaced by new campaigns, his name scrubbed from the skyline. She walked freely, head high, no longer defined by fear or shame. One afternoon, she and Daniel visited the Queens neighborhood where she grew up. The small apartment where she once struggled still stood, paint chipped and windows cracked. Daniel looked at it curiously. "This is where you raised me, right?" Elena nodded. "Yes, it wasn't much, but it was where we survived." Daniel smiled softly. "Then it's special, because it's where we started." Her heart swelled. For years she had seen that apartment as a place of hardship, but through her son's eyes it became a symbol, not of struggle but of resilience. As weeks turned into months, Elena's life blossomed. She accepted speaking invitations, using her story to inspire women who felt trapped in toxic relationships. She reminded them that silence was not strength, that leaving could be the first step toward freedom. Each time she spoke, she thought of the night she left Adrian, carrying nothing but courage and the life inside her. That night had broken her once, but it had also saved her. At home, laughter filled the air more often than tears. Dinner was shared without tension. Nights were quiet, not haunted by nightmares. Slowly, Elena and Daniel weren't just healing, they were thriving. And as she tucked her son into bed one evening, Daniel whispered, "Mom, our life feels brand new." Elena smiled, brushing his hair back. "That's because it is, sweetheart. This is our beginning." And for the first time in 8 years, their future stretched wide open, filled not with fear, but with possibility. The trial of Adrian Cole became one of the most watched in recent memory. For months, the courtroom was filled with lawyers, reporters, and cameras eager to capture the downfall of a man who had once seemed untouchable. The evidence stacked against him was overwhelming: fraud, tax evasion, and the attempted kidnapping of his own son. Even Vanessa Moore, the woman for whom he had betrayed Elena, took the stand against him. The verdict was decisive: guilty. Adrian Cole was sentenced to years behind bars. The cameras flashed as he was led away in handcuffs, no longer a millionaire, no longer a man of power, but just another fallen figure swallowed by his own greed. For the world, it was justice. For Elena, it was closure. She sat in the gallery that day, Daniel's small hand wrapped in hers. As the judge pronounced the sentence, she exhaled deeply, as if releasing 8 years of pain in a single breath. Daniel looked up at her, his eyes wide but steady. "It's over, Mom," he whispered. She squeezed his hand. "Yes, sweetheart. It's finally over." The city celebrated her courage. Articles praised her as a woman who had faced betrayal and turned it into strength. But Elena didn't see herself as extraordinary. She saw herself as a mother who had simply refused to give up. Life after the trial was quieter, gentler. Taurus interiors flourished, giving Elena purpose and independence. Marco remained by her side, their sibling bond stronger than ever. And Daniel continued to shine, his genius opening doors to opportunities once unimaginable. Yet, despite the recognition, Elena always kept him grounded. "Titles and awards don't matter as much as kindness," she reminded him. Daniel nodded, never forgetting the lessons carved from their years of struggle. One evening, Elena was invited to speak at a global women's summit. The audience was filled with women from every walk of life, some successful, some still trapped in silent battles. Elena stood on the stage, her voice calm yet powerful. "I once thought strength meant staying silent. I thought it meant enduring whatever pain was given to me. But I learned that true strength is choosing to walk away, even when your heart is breaking. It's choosing to protect your children, your dignity, and your future." She paused, her eyes glistening. "To every woman who feels unseen, unheard, or unworthy, please know this: you are not alone. You are not powerless, and you are never defined by the man who tries to break you. You can rise, you can heal, and you can create a new beginning." The hall erupted in applause, women standing, some crying, others holding each other. Elena felt the weight of their stories, their pain, their hope, and for the first time she didn't just feel like she had survived. She felt like she was leading others out of the shadows too. That night, as she returned home, Daniel ran into her arms, his face beaming. "Mom, you were amazing," he said. "You showed everyone that women can be strong." Elena held him close, her heart swelling. "I didn't do it alone. I did it because of you. You gave me courage when I had none. You gave me a reason to fight." As the city lights twinkled outside their window, Elena knew the story of her life had been rewritten. No longer the woman discarded by a selfish husband, she was now the woman who had turned betrayal into power, pain into purpose. And as she kissed Daniel goodnight, she whispered a final promise. "The past may have broken us, but the future will never forget how we rose." So that's where our story closes, my wonderful friends. You're still here, right? If you've stayed with me all the way until now, it must mean something inside this journey touched your heart in a special way. Maybe it reminded you of your own struggles, or maybe it gave you strength to face tomorrow with a little more courage. Life, as the Stoics remind us, isn't about what happens to us, but how we respond. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Elena's story is proof of that. She couldn't control betrayal, lies, or cruelty, but she could control her will, her choices, and her love for her son. That's how she transformed her pain into power, and her silence into a voice that inspired thousands. Maybe tonight you needed to hear that you are stronger than you think, that no matter who tried to break you, your story isn't finished yet. So if this touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel. Let's keep walking this path of healing and strength together.